Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to our service. I'm just adjusting the camera here. Yeah. So, if you would like, you can share your Okay. Um, do- okay, here we go. Sorry, this is actually so much of what was happening last Monday. Um, for Medicine Buddha, it was weird technology, just like for some strange reason has not been working out for me this week. But in any case, here we are. I don't think anything else is gonna happen. Um, but in any case, whatever happens, happens. So welcome everyone. Welcome to those who are new to the space, to this kind of Sunday service. Which happens irregularly. But I'm always in progress, working on things to get them more regular. Um, it's hard to be consistent when the world is inconsistent. So, um, to be on top of stuff when the world is perpetually falling apart. It's a lesson that I think many of us we get real frustrated about. Um, things falling apart, right? Impermanence, which is the rule. Name of the game is impermanence. Everything's falling apart. Everything's moving and shifting. Um, and I think this is why this practice is really important. The practice of Tara, what I call Matara. It's a way for us to actually tune into the shifting, changing nature of reality itself and the essence of reality. I think the world, what we perceive as the world or reality, is like this swirling mass of stuff. Is like a storm, and that's reality. That's samsara, right? This world that we're living with, and it's a storm. Even when we feel as if everything is settled and calm and everything's going really well, it's still a storm. There's still a lot of shifting, a lot of movement. There's no certainty um, to anything, even though we trick ourselves into believing in permanence and certainty. There's no such thing as that. Everything is changing, everything is always moving. It's moving often and on such a deep level that we haven't done the training and the practice to develop the sensitivity to the hyper subtle, nuanced experiences of change and movement. So, like, when we touch into the essence of the mother, what we're doing is touching into the stillness of everything that's happening, of the movement of the storm. There's stillness in everything. There's stillness in even the most chaotic experience, right? And some of our lives are very chaotic, but there's still stillness there. There's still stillness in death. There's still stillness in violence and trauma and sadness and heartbreak. There's stillness and joy. The stillness and everything, but we have to do the labor to begin to touch into that stillness that's inherent. That's the inherent nature of everything. And stillness and silence are two different things, right? Still, silence. You know, it's the absence of noise, right? But stillness is is more than silence. It's a settledness. It's an essence, right? Um, it's it's being in the heart of the ocean when on the surface of the ocean there's a storm, passing through. It's walking and moving through situations that are, really chaotic and tense, but still practicing awareness of who and what you are and awareness of things happening in your experience and using that awareness as an anchor. We're using those experiences of self as anchors that really begin to take care, what I call taking care, but anchoring your awareness, right, and your attention, you know, because stillness happens when we've mastered reactivity. So reactivity keeps us from the stillness. There can be no experience of stillness if first there is no mastery of reactivity, right? So what am I really talking about when I talk about mastery of reactivity to enter into stillness, right? So what am I talking about? Um, it's not rhetorical. I'm sorry, this isn't a rhetorical question. You can type things into the chat box. You can interact. Like, what does that mean? What, for those of you who have been on this very traditional path, of Mahamudra, of deity practice, what does that mean when we've mastered our reactivity? You know, to master reactivity means that we've also mastered a particular stage of Mahamudra. So what would that be? Mastery involves presence. And so one of the things that I'm interested in now, I guess I've always been interested in, it's really asking myself, okay, what? So we go through different practices, different traditions, whatever, in meditation and whatever, right? And we take on language of these traditions, and we say things like cultivating, and what are some of these keywords? Cultivating, presence, it's one of those. Awareness, mindfulness, realization, enlightenment. We just these are just buzzwords that we take on, but most of us actually have no idea what they mean because we haven't actually done this labor to understand what these experiences are for us. I'm not saying that you're not having the experience. I'm saying that you haven't reframed that experience in a way that makes sense for you, if that makes sense. You know, um, shifting what the activity arises into just me or conditional awareness that's cleared within. So again, go deeper. you know, like keep going deeper. Um, like, what does it mean? What does awareness mean? What does reactivity mean? What does unconditioned mean? You know, because that's the method that actually leads us into the stillness, that leads us into the essence of everything, right? It's that perpetual deconstruction into the essence, into the base. And the more, if you do it really well, you're going to run out of language, right? And once you hit the threshold of language, then the next thing is to step into the experience completely. You step into the experience completely, you know, then it's just an experience, right? And you're going to, depending on who you are, you're going to experience a lot of frustration because you're going to want to describe that experience, but you get to trying to describe it and you realize there's no words because the conceptual mind doesn't experience, right? The conceptual mind gets to the threshold. Beyond that threshold, concepts don't exist. It's just experience. It's the unarticulable. I guess I said that wrong. On what can't be articulated. I have to actually figure out how to pronounce that word in a later date. I keep saying unarticulable. Anyway, no. But you get to the threshold, right? When you get to the threshold of conceptualization, then you have to have the courage to step over that threshold into the experience, right? Um, so it's like, I don't know if you've seen, I love this movie because it taught me a lot. The Jodie Foster movie, um, the Jodie Foster movie where she is not first. I don't think it's First Contact, um, and it's not Silence of the Lambs. So anyway, it's the Jodie Foster movie where she's the astronaut, the scientist, and her father has passed, and she's involved in this experiment that takes you to another dimension or heaven. Contact. That's right. It's contact. Um, so so she's involved in this experiment. She does this experiment, and it works, right? And then there's this whole government, probe that starts up, and this committee is trying to figure out, okay, what happened. Does this experiment work? Is this project valid? And um and she has this, her character has this epiphany, that she had this experience where she connected to her dad. She went somewhere else, connected to her dad, had this cathartic experience, then came back and realized that she couldn't prove it. She couldn't prove it. She could barely explain it. And I love that movie because it really is, it helps us to understand that there are so many things that we won't ever be able to explain, to articulate for ourselves and for others, right? And this is the same thing with this practice. We're moving into space, we're moving to the stillness that can't be articulated, that can be barely proved, but I'm going to get back to that because it can be proved. We can't describe it for people, but we can just experience it. And the frustration of this is that we want to do it because we're living in cultures, right? That we've been, many of us have been taught to, like, we have to prove what we experienced, right? We have to, like, argue and have evidence, you know. But the evidence, going back to the evidence, there is evidence because the evidence is evident in how we change, like how suffering is reduced, how we're happier, how we feel more connected, how we get clearer. Like when we go and touch into the stillness, we bring back something, right, into the form world, into our bodies, right? And we bring back clarity. And that clarity has a direct impact on how we move through the world and how we are in relationships. If that touching into stillness isn't having that impact, you're not doing it right, right? And in Buddha Dharma, right, in traditions of Buddhism, and the Dharma taught by the Buddhists, what Buddha Dharma means, you know, um, we're practicing to change how we interact with ourselves and with the world. You know, our fundamental project is transformation. You know, so if the practice isn't changing fundamentally how we're moving through the world, then we have to really examine, and are we practicing in the way that we should be practicing? So I feel mastery is experiencing the ability to go deeper each time into the stillness. In my tradition, we call it entering the realm of the soma, right? The deeper body, and talk about it as being fundamentally outspoken. Yeah. So it's somatic awareness practice or somatic experience, right? Going deeper into the body. like going deeper into, well, the labor of the physical manifestation. Um, like going to, so, and it also means going into the heart of trauma, since we're, going into the heart of disequilibrium, going into the heart of dis-ease, going into the heart, you know, of being unsettled, being out of sync, um, going through the storm, knowing that going through the storm is actually going into the heart of things itself, you know. But going back to this mastery piece, like the mastery of reactivity is mastering the first stage of shamatha, of calm abiding, right? That's what we're trying to do. That first stage of Mahamudra is actually allow things to be, allow things to be. Um, and that's the mastery of non-reactivity. As Lama Justin teaches the 6 nails of Talopa, right? And you can find the 6 nails online too, but reactivity, non-doing, right? Just allowing. Non-reacting, that's all pretty much the 6 nails, right? Um, and in that allowing, right, and that mastery of non-reactivity, then like we move into the second stage, right, in Mahamudra, which is, vipassana or insight, right? Because there has to be agency. The mastery of shamatha, non-reactivity, is actually the development of agency, of self-agency, that I'm actually learning how to choose to be in relationship to my mind and body. And I can't go deeper into understanding mind and body and really all phenomena, right? It's not just about mind and body, it's about everything. I can't go deeper into everything until I allow everything to be there. You know? So a lot of folks, you know, and I think, you know, like uh, like Theravada and traditions and insight. Insight is like the new it's a popular movement, within Theravada Buddhism. It's a popular white movement in Theravada. Um, but I think something that insight does well is like, of course, being a Satipatthana centered, kind of tradition. Is like they do really well in that stage of like non-reactivity, right? In that first level, you know, of calm abiding shamatha, right? Um, and if we don't get that first level of practice, then we can't get anywhere else. And everything in tantric Buddhism is really predicated on our mastery of non-reactivity, on shamatha and the master of shamatha. Like you can't get to Tara if you haven't experienced this mastery, or if you haven't experienced some aspect of it, right? And again, I want to point out too that this is always work in progress, right? There's sometimes that we can't hold that space, and sometimes we can, but what we're working on is developing an experience of what the mastery is, at least. Um, and that when we talk about mother practice and the mother and the tradition of the Mahavidyas and the practice of the divine feminine, of Shakti, once we get into that, that kind of practice, it's about how can I just allow the experience of the mother, of course, in this case, Tara, Matara, Mother Tara, how can I allow this experience of the mother to be in? my experience, to be there, to be present, you know, instead of just reacting to everything, to allow it to be, whatever it is, right? Um, and you can't, it's one of the obstacles in getting into that space is not trusting ourselves, which is something that many of you are really struggling with. You're really struggling with trust, you know, and that's natural. Like, a lot of this is natural. Yeah, of course. Like, we're living in contexts where we've not actually been taught to trust ourselves. And this is the realm of illusion as well. So, like, not only that, we're being taught that, well, everything's just an illusion. So what do you trust? You can actually trust the illusion. You can trust that the illusion is indeed an illusion. you know? Um, and that kind of basic trust of the illusion actually helps us to enter into what I call like a game. Like, it's a game that I'm playing. That game is like, yeah, I know this isn't real, but I'm playing along. You know, and for most of us, that's an intellectual, like, to say that something isn't real is just an intellectual thing. And that's where we start. We started with saying, okay, this isn't real. We don't believe it, right? But we say, but this isn't real. That's where we start. But over time, what we're trying to get to is a deep intuition of the illusion of all of this. That deep intuition is where it's the point from which we begin to bend reality. You know. And once you get to that place of like saying, yeah, this doesn't exist, but I'm making a conscious decision to play along in certain ways. Right? Once you get to that place, there's a lot of space that begins to open up for the mother to be present. And that felt intuitive experience of the illusion of everything, that just a little piece of that intuition will feel extremely liberatory for you. It's just like a little crack that opens up in this like this wall of realness. That little crack opens, that little tiny crack, and that's all you need, because you look at it and you go, oh, this thing can be cracked open. And that offers us a lot of, well, we begin to trust that. There's a conviction that arises, right? So, well, first of all, it's the conviction that says, oh, this can be disrupted, like this isn't as real as I thought it was. And you begin to trust the practice, you know. And then you begin to trust yourself that you have the capacity to crack this open, right? What exactly isn't real? Well, nothing's real. Nothing is real. You know, even what I'm sitting here and saying isn't real. Like, this is just the coming together of perceptions and and assumptions and you know, like the realness, like what is real, what's really real, right? The space is real, like the emptiness is real, the suchness is real. Um, what's real often is what is unborn. And what often is unborn lies outside, you know, of impermanence. And, whatever is created is bound by the laws of impermanence. You know, um, so Rachel says, I'm reading the science of climate change and it's horrific, and I have a deep reaction to that and to the refusal of folks to stop the damage. I get mad. Yeah. So, what's not real, the climate change or a reaction to that? Well, none of it's real. Like that's the thing that we have to negotiate. Like when we move into compassionate action and change, we also have to move from this place of saying, and this is a dream, you know, because there isn't climate change in the spirit world, in the bardo. However, in the bardo, there is a tendency for us to create realities that are reminiscent of the realities that we've just emerged from. So, in one way, climate change can continue into the bardo. I just realized that my light turned on. There we go. I feel so much more comfortable with the lights on. Anyhow, right. So, so this is the contradiction that you have to work with and still do the work. Is that yes, climate change is real, climate instability is real, and then at the moment of my death, I have to be able to let all of this go because this is a reality that I don't have to deal with anymore. And that begins, when we haven't done the work to let go of the phases that we're moving out of, then that's when we become attached to this realm. We become what we often would say earthbound in the formless. So when we die, our consciousness, spirit, however you want to describe that, stays bound to this reality, right? Or at least into a plane of existence that's close in proximity, really close proximity to this reality. Um, there have been countless dreams. We've gone through countless existences, countless dreams, countless everything. You know, I've been waking up with the feeling that everything is illusionary. It's all been instilling that fear beyond reality. Yeah. And this is why the practice that we're going to get into. I'm kind of mixing Mahamudra and Tara together in the session. So I know maybe I said that the second hour will be Mahamudra. It's all the same. The second hour we'll be practicing. But yes, it's unsettling, right? It initially is unsettling because we're learning how to hold. We're learning. What are we learning? Let me back. I'm always creating new language for everything. Um, what we're learning. Well, I guess it. I know. I always say this. I'm always teaching this, but it goes back to the Heart Sutra. You know, it goes right back to the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness is no other than form. There is no eye. There is no ear. There is no taste. And so forth. Right? It's the deconstructionist teaching. We're essentializing. Well, not essential. That's not the right word. But it's a deconstruction. The Heart Sutra is a deconstruction, right? But form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. We're always sliding to the extremes of form and emptiness, right? Or materialism and nihilism, right? We're always slipping back and forth. And what the Heart Sutra is actually getting us to do is to occupy the center, the middle way, right? The middle way, which is what Buddha Dharma, that's the philosophy. The school of philosophy is the middle way, it's Taranatha. Or is it Taranatha? Yeah, I think it's Taranatha. Anyhow, don't quote me. the middle way, that it's both. It's both emptiness. Well, it's both real and not real. It is and it ain't at the same time. And the teaching is to bring those extremes together into the middle way, and to live within a disrupted experience, a perpetually disrupted experience of this is and it ain't. So when we're going through these experiences, you're waking up to the illusion, you know. What we're also disrupted by is our deepened sensitivity to spaciousness as well. So we're trying to negotiate, or we're trying to develop, we're trying to be in relationship to an experience of wide openness, which is unsettling. Because ego exists in permanence and contraction and tightness. So when we start having experiences that are opposite of that, it's disarming, because it's hard for the ego to exist, to maintain permanence when we start experiencing space, right? And so our sense of self changes, right? Our relationship to reality begins to change, because you realize, I have freedom, I have agency, I can make different choices, right? But also what happens is the wisdom, like I see things much more broadly, right? You see a broader experience of things, not just this one thing, right? You begin to see multiple things and experience multiple things. So you start getting all this data coming in, not just from your senses, but just from how the mind has become outwardly facing, not inwardly facing. So when I say outwardly facing, I mean it's beginning to connect to its natural spaciousness. When I say inwardly facing, I mean that it's contracting around this sense of self and ego. So spaciousness becomes disorienting, right? Because our ego is struggling to make sense of space. It's struggling to figure out how it's going to survive. Or another way to put that, when we come into space, we struggle because we don't know who we are in this space and freedom and choice and agency. This is why the work of liberation is so hard, because there's this deep distrust of freedom, because it's so counterintuitive to the constriction of the ego. And that means that we have to start giving up bullshit, because we begin to see what the bullshit is. It's hard to give up the bullshit because we're so comfortable in the bullshit, right? But when you give up the bullshit, you take on more responsibility of being free. Freedom is more responsibility. It's more responsibility because you see things more things are clear, right? You begin to understand that there are more choices to be made that actually may disappoint people, that may actually disrupt everything that you've used to build a sense of self. That's the price of freedom, is this kind of letting go of the things that we don't need any longer, even people. So the labor here is that I have to continue to work this threshold to enter into the stillness. And as I enter into the stillness, I begin to understand the illusionary nature of everything. And I have to come back and still give a shit about people, about the climate, about everything. I have to give a shit about everything, knowing that all this is just a figment of my imagination. You don't get that until you die, right? But what we're trying to do is get that now and still hold on. Because when we start transitioning into the bardo, into the spirit realm, that transition, if we have this realization that yes, like this is just an illusion, then we're able to have this agency as we move into the bardo. And it's an agency that most beings do not have currently. I promise you. You know? Right? That so many people don't think about this, they don't have the practice, they don't think about death until they die. And the bardo in the spirit realm isn't, it's not the best time to start practicing agency. Particularly agency as it relates to your energetic body, the mental body, which is how I understand the consciousness and the spirit. This is your mental body, right? The more you believe in this reality, the more you use that. Fixation isn't the word. The more it's okay. So I'll back and say that this may be a whole another track, but I'm going to say this instead. Maybe this will convey what I'm trying to articulate, which is that, and this is basically Buddhism again, but you're already free. You're already free, right? We're already Buddhists, awakened. We're already there. We just don't believe it. Because what we're doing instead is believing in the we're believing right in the nonsense. We're believing in the form too much. Right? The form keeps us trapped, it keeps us bound. That belief in form easily transfers into the bardo, the spirit world, where our mental bodies, our minds are still there. So our minds and how we've trained our minds, produces reality, and we just keep producing a reality that feels familiar with us even after we die. And the point of Buddha is to release us from this perpetual creation and recreation of something that we don't have to be in, including hell realms, right? We create hell realms. A hell realm isn't a place. It's a thought. Everything is a thought. This world is a thought. The spirit world is a thought. The bardo is a thought, right? Not a. I really want to make this joke, but half you won't get it, so I'm not even gonna try, because there's a thought, and then there's a thought. There's a thought, and then there's a thought. There's a thought here, and then there's a thought over there. And none of you are getting it. That's what's so upsetting. And some of us are thoughts. Still not getting it. Thank you. There's enough millennials in this space to get this. Thank you. Um, but right. So yeah. So if we can't liberate ourselves from the thought, there can be no freedom. Thus, going back to mastery of non-reactivity. The first thing that we do in our liberation from a thought is to allow the thought to be there. That's where we start at. If we can't do that basic ground level work, then freedom is impossible. It's not in this framework, right? That we're practicing, it's not possible without the thought, without allowing the thought to be. Um, so allow the thought to be, and that thought over there to be. Both of the thoughts have to be. Still not getting it. Some people are getting it. um, all thoughts have to be allowed to be themselves without our reactivity. Um, Let me just read through some of the comments. Mm-hmm. So the more, yeah. So yeah, I can, this is, we just have to keep talking about it and thinking about it. But um, like I can't understate how, and I'm using this really intentionally, how revolutionary non-reactivity to thoughts can be, and how that non-reactivity leads us into stillness, how revolutionary that is, how imperative that is to freedom. Not just ultimate freedom, but also social liberation, social freedom. You know, it's hard to create the change that we need to see in the world because we're too much in it. Like we're really in it, you know. And we're also so extremely self-identified with the issue we're struggling with, because we have to do this deep work of saying and understanding that, like, what if this issue were completely eradicated? That's going to be really overwhelming for us because we've built our whole identities around particular struggles and particular experiences that some of us have around privilege and disprivilege. Like this, the ego has built a sense of self even around that. Who am I if I don't experience significant experiences of oppression? Who am I, if I don't experience certain levels of privilege, even though I may not be conscious of it? If those senses of privilege and disprivilege disappear, who am I? And we don't think about that. We don't do the work, but we continue to work forward. But some of us, as we're continuing to work to struggle against issues, we're also, some of us are unconsciously perpetuating those issues because we actually need those issues to figure out who we are. You know, without racism, who am I as a black person, right? Without homophobia, who am I as a queer person? Um, can I let go of these identity locations, particularly at the moment of my death? Can I say, well, this was great? you know, at the moment of death, you should be like, I did the damn thing. Moving on. Thank you, next. As Ariana Grande says, thank you, next. And that's the attitude as we move into the bardo, right? It's like, thank you to this life, and next. And I look forward. What's happening next? It's hard to continue that transition when you're holding on to the world and to countless beings. I can't, there's no way I can number. Countless beings are in that state of holding on to this world and trying to move on. It's impossible. You can't do that, you know. And if you get too intense about it, right, your consciousness actually begins to split, which no one ever talks about. Um, But my teacher actually used to talk about that all the time. And Lord Rinpoche used to talk about that. How consciousness splits, right? And we can't progress towards freedom until our consciousness is unified. Which is like mind blowing. It's mind blowing, And then you're like, wait, and then part of those teachings says that like, oh, there are other beings who have to come along and help you reassemble consciousness, and you're like, the depth of suffering that we can experience is, you know, some of us have been through hell in this life, but there are many depths of hell that we can experience, that can seem like eternity, you know. And yeah, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to think about that. That's really scary. Yeah, don't think about it then. Instead, just practice, which is what I do. I can get, I can go, I can, you know, to be transparent, I can go and like look at all this stuff, right? I can go, I can travel mentally and just do, if you've read anything, particularly some of my more recent writing, I do talk about that, particularly in Black and Buddhist, in the anthology Black and Buddhist, I do talk about that, but I can go and see this, I can experience this, so this is firsthand knowledge for me, there are beings trapped in experiences that will never be liberated until people with the ability, the capacity to touch into their reality can pull them out, right? So there are countless. That Rinpoche used to talk about. You can read this too, but he used to talk about there being like cities, like you literally said, like cities of formless beings in the bar, like creating cities, where beings are just stuck. You're just like, you know, um, so to have a precious human life, to have this interest in spiritual practice, right? This interest in experiencing the formless while being in the body, like and this interest in reducing violence and harm, and deepening in love and compassion. Like this is so incredibly, like it's rare. It's rare. Like I know, you don't get this necessarily, but like you don't understand how Rinpoche would say lucky, you know, but we don't do luck in Buddhism, but he would always say lucky. He's like, you're very lucky. You're very lucky, but so I always say fortunate. But this is not about luck. Like it's been about effort that we've all put in to be here in this time and place. You know. But it's the effort that we put in that has brought us to this time, this place, this practice. And we can't take it for granted, even though we do. Like you have to. A really good practice is to stop taking everything for granted. Stop. I mean, in one way, the samsara is like a pain, right? It's just like, but another way, we have everything that we need to get free. Actually, you can literally just go on YouTube, and just like, just get all kinds of teachings, right? So the teachings aren't the problem. The teachings are like a waterfall. It's just like we're drenched in teachings. The problem is, not all of us, most of us aren't actually practicing. We're just, it's like being thirsty but being surrounded by water. and you're just like, oh, it's nothing to drink, you know, and you're like sitting beside, an ocean of fresh water, drinkable water. That's how many of us will move through this life. That all the liberatory teachings, methodologies, practices, teachers, everything and everyone is here for us, but we won't all develop the capacity to engage, to drink from everything that's available to us, and then we die, right? And maybe we have the fortune, the karma, the merit to move through the bardo and then to come back to be reborn, you know, and some of us won't, you know. So Jeff says, if there are beings who won't be liberated and pull out, why aren't the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas doing that for all beings? They are doing that. You don't understand the immensity of existence. We have to when we approach the literature of this is what my new book is about. Actually, everything I'm talking to you about is from the writing that I'm doing. When we approach the literature about Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, it's super, super, super romanticized in a way. Not completely, in a way. You know, a Buddha isn't that powerful. I mean, like, yes, a Buddha is an awakened being, not just an awakened being, a being who knows that they're awakened, which is what we're not. Like, we're awakened beings, but we don't know we're awakened. But of course, when no being knows that they're awakened, there's incredible agency, right? But a Buddha doesn't have the ability to liberate everyone. A Buddha only has the ability to liberate beings who want to be liberated. And what you don't understand is that an overwhelming number of beings don't understand liberation and won't ever, again, as I was saying, you're surrounded by liberation, but you're not interested. So a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, right, can't drag you out of being bound because that's violence. You have to consent to getting free. A Buddha can't help you unless you consent to being helped. So a teaching that some of you have probably had multiple times, I know I have, is the compassion of the Buddha, right? So the compassion of the Buddha teaching is described as a hook, right? So here's I wish I had an actual hook, but here's a hook. Like, this is the Buddha who's reaching down, and here's me. This is me. Here's the Buddha. The Buddha's right here, and so the Buddha doesn't come and grab you and pull you out. The Buddha's just here, and then it's me and my practice and my work that begins to wander to the Buddha and say, "Oh, this looks good. I want to get free." When I develop that aspiration, then I hook to the compassion of the Buddha, and then I began to be pulled out, right? But you have to get hooked, right? That has to hook somewhere, you know. And Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are always doing this, but what is the prayer? Um, I want to say this comes out of some of you insight folks can help with this, but the line is no. This is from Zen, some Zen practice. This is I say this, I always say this prayer at Zen, in Zen communities. And so the line is beings beings are boundless or vast, or beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. So beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. These are basic. I vow to liberate them all. These are basic contradictions that arise within our practice. Contradiction drives the work of liberation for the Bodhisattva. Beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Right. So this basic contradiction. I remember when this happened to me. We would always pray that, like, I want to liberate all beings. I remember Rinpoche would just start looking at us, looking at me. When I said that, when we were praying, he would just kind of look, and, then you begin to understand, oh, like, I'm not going to liberate all beings. No Buddha. The Buddha didn't even liberate all beings. There have been countless Buddhas, and there's still countless beings. You know, um, that's the fundamental contradiction, that I'm vowing to liberate all beings. I won't liberate all beings. But to get into knowing my wakefulness, I have to buy into this deep belief that I can free all beings, because that's how extreme. After it gets so extreme around the development of wisdom and compassion, that's the only way that I can touch into my awakened state, is that I have to, like, I have to brainwash myself. This is, the Bodhisattva prayers from Shantideva. Particularly, a lot of our Bodhisattva prayers come from Shantideva, but it's a system of brainwash. I have to brainwash myself to believe that I have the capacity to free beings, all beings, countless beings. And I have to lose myself. And this goes to back to the Heart Sutra, particularly in the Gate mantra, Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisoha, right? That that mantra means that I have to go to the edge, then I have to go to the edge of the edge, then I have to go to the edge of the edge of the edge, and I have to go to the edge of the edge of the edge of the edge. I have to keep pushing and pushing out and further out and through limitation, because that's what it means. That's the labor that I have to do to get free. I have to keep pushing and pushing, right? I have to, when I get to one wall of compassion, I have to push through that wall into the next layer of compassion till I become. It's like Michelle Obama becoming, right? It's like we're becoming. You're becoming compassion. You're becoming wisdom. It's no longer something that you're doing. It's no longer something that you're practicing. You're becoming the embodiment of these things. And as you're on this path of becoming, you're helping beings, right? Because in this process, we are inspiring, we're triggering people. As they see us get awakened, it reminds them, or it proves to them that this is possible. That's the work of the Bodhisattvas, to inspire beings to do the labor for themselves. And then you hit that awakening, then you realize, oh, like, I can't liberate all beings, because all beings have to consent to the liberation. And I've done everything that I can do, right? So I think of the Bodhisattva tradition as a pyramid scheme. You know, my dad and stepmom used to do Amway when I was a teenager. It was like, these pyramid schemes, But the Bodhisattva tradition is a pyramid scheme. It's like I do work, and then I get other people around me inspired to do work, and then they get people around them inspired to do work. So it's like a pyramid. It just starts spreading out. Like our historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, right? You could say that he's the head of our pyramid scheme in this particular age. So he started this particular path of awakening, and that began to influence and inspire a whole tradition of people doing work to get free, right? And he was like, okay, peace. I've done what I needed to do. I'm heading to Nirvana. You know, um, it's there's a level of realism. I guess it's the word realism. You see, it's sober. It's a sobering realism, pragmatic realism. I have this new theory that I'm working on for my new book called. I have a lot of new theories that are going to be in the book, but this theory is called practical dharma, and part of practical dharma is actually about getting real about what the work is. It's not so much getting lost in this really intense figurative language that we're informed by, you know, but it's reorienting ourselves into the real work of what it means to get free and what our real impact will be. I will not liberate all beings. So, right, so on one hand, I'm not going to liberate all beings, you know, and at the same time, my primary aspiration is to free all beings. Ooh, it sounds like the Heart Sutra again. It sounds like contradiction drives our path, right? There's a tension within the contradiction that propels us. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to use that tension to get us free. That tension is just disruption. Like it keeps us like so like uncomfortable. It's like we just want to sit still and be great, but when we sit and how these teachings collide, then we're just always being shook. We're always being like we just can't stay still. That's important. We don't want to settle. We always want to be disrupted. And there's still stillness and disruption that we can lean into, right? Like this is late. But I mean, this is kind of where I am. I've had to just go through all of this, right? I've had to go through really the practice. Like this is not intellectual. This is practice. This is my experience in my meditation, in my embodiment, in my work with compassion and love. This is what I've had to survive moving through this. It's like, yeah, and where I'm at now, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to free everyone. Not all of us are going to make it. Not all of us are going to make it at the same time, right? Because part of these bodhisattva prayers is that all I'm going to stay behind as a bodhisattva until all beings get free. That's impossible. You're not going to do that. You know, the work of getting free or enlightenment or getting enlightened is a snowball effect. Like once we get the momentum up and going, it's like a snowball speeding, collecting, right, as it speeds down a hill. Like a snowball doesn't know how to stop itself. Once it's like avalanching right down, a mountain. In the same way, once we get into this irresistible movement, right, when wisdom and compassion come together, it's this irresistible movement, right? We just can't stop that. So we're like speeding towards enlightenment once we get into that stream, and we're not gonna. You can't just stop and say, I'm just gonna stay at the doorway of enlightenment until everyone gets through. Again, not everyone. You're not. Not everyone's going to be ready when you're ready. Right? No, everyone's not. When you're ready to cross the threshold, you have to be like, listen, I did what I did what I could, peace. Because you know, as you cross the threshold, is that there are all these other beings that you've inspired. And they're going to inspire all these other beings. And those beings are going to inspire other beings. So you say, yeah, and then there's labor that still has to be done by other beings who are still in the process. And I've reached that process. I've reached the end of this process, and I can consent to to enter nirvana is what we're talking about. Enter into a dissolving back into suchness completely. Um, but again, those of you who've been with me for a while, I say this all the time. I'm gonna keep saying it again. I'm gonna say it again. I've already said it several times. Not all of us are gonna make it. You know that you're not gonna save everyone. Everyone isn't gonna give a shit about what you know about the world and reality. You know, right? Like I can go, I can just go, places, to Target and to the Kroger, um, Kroger here in the South is a Southern institution, um, and I can just walk around. I can, you know, and I can, yeah, I can, I have a lot of wisdom to give to people, if they ask, and people do sometimes, but like most people just won't care. They're not interested. They're doing their life. And what I have committed to, and I think what some of you have committed to, is asking more questions. More, it's not just about this life, right? But it's about all the different ways that we're manifesting. These are these larger questions that we get into when we start talking about spirituality. How am I manifesting beyond what I'm experiencing in this moment in the body? Um, Nor am I going to proselytize to people, right? I'm not going to like set up outside the Kroger and start preaching to people, you know. Nor do I feel compelled to do that either. Um, like not everyone's gonna make it, and it's okay. I don't lose sleep over that. Not everyone's gonna make that. I'm not. Not everyone's gonna get liberated from my teaching. Matter of fact, you may get more confused. From these teachings, and that's okay. You know, I don't believe that beings will be. I don't know. I don't want to say that. So that's. I don't know if I've thought through that one enough, but I mean, I will say this though: time is a concept. When we talk about forever, I mean, what is forever? I mean, what is forever? What is eternity? You know, help design the pamphlets. you know, there's a pamphlet, and it's called Love and Rage. The cliff notes of Love and Rage. That can be the pamphlet. Um, um, so I will say this: there are the books, the commentaries, and the teachings, and then there's experience. And so what you may experience from me, well, I come from experience. It's like, what is the experience that's happening here? You know, There are things that these famous teachers will not say publicly, right? Um, I think sometimes the more famous you get as a teacher, the more your integrity is compromised. You stop saying the things that really need to be said because that will disrupt the resources that you're getting from people, and that completely disrupts the quality, I think, of teaching. And the more you get into this, the more you begin to realize, oh, there's no such thing as Buddhism. you know, um, there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in the phenomenal world and the formless world that actually doesn't line up. There's a level of perfection that classical Buddhism maintain the level. What did I say? What was the word? Perfectionism. A level of perfection. Yeah, perfection. A level of perfection that convinces us that everything lines up and it doesn't. You know. And of course, and I shared a story of how Rinpoche would just look at me and be like, "No, no, you're not actually going to liberate all beings. You're actually not going to wait till everyone's liberated. That's not going to do. But we pray about it. It's not going to happen. You know. But it was actually who just came out and said. I think Chongo Rinpoche. When I was in retreat, Chongo Rinpoche came in and was just like, you're not going to liberate all beings. We'll help a whole bunch of beings. You're not going to liberate all of them. You know. Um, but this is the labor here is that we still have to perform and act and work to liberate all beings. And you have to free. This is the level of teaching that is hard to get to. Level, not the teaching, not the level of teaching, but the level of practice that you have to get to. That I hope many of you are working towards is that even though you realize all these contradictions and illusions, you're still working incredibly hard to free beings. And the best thing that we can do to liberate beings is just to liberate ourselves, is to do the work, to do the practice, and let people see what that's like. Right? To let people see the labor that you're doing. That is, I think, a beautiful gift that the Bodhisattva offers to the world, is to let the world see them work, so that you know how to do the work moving forward. This is why dedication and merit is really powerful. It's like whatever I'm doing, I don't, whatever I've just done, I just give it away. You know, that whatever I produce that's positive and good, I just give away. I let it go. And it goes wherever it needs to go to help people. That's the best that some of us can do. But that is a tremendous amount that we can do. Right? What joy I experience, I give away, that all beings may experience this. I don't know what all beings is, but I can just try to give that away. And this is what I'm thinking is practical dharma. Is like this is the practicality. This is what I'm doing. This is my limitations. You know. And I have compassion for all beings. I mourn with all beings. I'm sensitive to the experiences of all beings, but it doesn't mean that I can't experience joy and happiness. I can't be grateful, right? That I can mourn, and keep my heart open, and at the same time, I can still experience the joy of all of this. You know? And some of that joy, well, a lot of that joy is, of course, all of the joy is an expression of our natural minds, right? But, this kind of like happiness that comes from space, right? Comes from the realization of space. It comes from like also saying, and this reality is something that is not permanent either. Like this isn't forever, you know. That there are other countless existences that, I've been in, I've moved out of, there are more to come. This is a cycle, this is a journey. Um, but, then we go back to our basic teachings. It's like non-reactivity, non-reactivity, the mastery of shamatha, the the ways in which that mastery leads to how we're able to experience and to allow energy just to move through, right? To move through bodies and minds, you know, and how our awareness and the spaciousness, that our awareness is cascading in and out of, is consuming the chaos, holding the chaos in such a way that I can just experience. I don't have to react. I can say, yeah. Earlier this morning I was moving through. Well, it's been a full moon, and then the full moon a couple of days. Every full moon, particularly this all year, really has been so intense for me. So I have to build a lot of ceremony and practice around full moons. Some of you have done some of this with me as well in Medicine Buddha, but um, full moons always just bring up a lot of stuff, a lot of emotions. Not all of it's mine. It's the sorrow of the world. You and I can just notice it. And it's snow. Like for those of you who have read Love and Rage, it's snow. I see it. I name it. I go through the process. I'm just allowing it. I'm just allowing it to move. The sorrow, the sadness. It doesn't have to be all mine, right? It doesn't be about me either. Um, no, you have to know I'm just not, I'm just, you know, you have to know that I experience a level of realization, that makes this clearer and clearer, you know. And I'm okay with saying that, I'm particularly writing a book about it, but, um, like, this isn't just shit that I read in the book. This is my experience. This is, and I got here because of all these practices that we have read about and heard about, that we've gotten from other teachers. All these practices lead to the awakening. And I'm absolutely that's you know it's not something that I'm hoping for. It's something that is actually is happening for me. You know, and that level of spaciousness that we begin to tune into creates like the capacity to see multiple things at once, to hear multiple things at once, to mentally go where you need to go to be of benefit. It's to go and, you know, talk to deities, you know, to talk to bodhisattvas and to visit teachers that are long been gone, you know, but whose consciousness is still quite palpable, right? Um, that's the beauty of guru practice, guru yoga practice in Vajrayana, is that, you know, the teacher's mind is always accessible for us, you know. But it's still, you know, regardless, it's still work, right? There's still the basic labor that I commit to doing every day, right? So it's not just like a walk in the park, but it's a capacity to know that I'm doing labor and work that I know. Well, I don't know how to phrase that, you know, but it's a level of lace for me. It's doing these labors, knowing that it's benefiting. Like whatever I can do for myself is what I'm also able to do for others. You know, like, so whatever I do, I can easily do it for others. Whatever I do for myself, I can easily do for others. You know, there's for me, there's a lot of gratitude that comes out of that, and joy and appreciation. Um, and not all of us, you know, not all of us are gonna have these experiences in this life, in this body. That's fine, because you're on the path. I know, I am 100% certain that many of you, I mean, I don't know some of you, so I just can't say, but those who I know actually know in life, you know, not, you know, that I've actually met and spent time with, I know that you're like working, and you're on the right path. Um, there's just something about just being, you know. You know, act as if you can liberate all beings. Yes. Contradiction in action. Yes. So I'm pondering Jesus' frustration with often being completely misunderstood, including by his closest disciples, possibly with the exception of Mary Magdalene. At the end, his deep grief about what he was not able to accomplish. He probably, but this is the shortest sentence in the New Testament. Jesus wept, speaking of that awakened being can accomplish. You know, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, what am I saying? um, yes, yeah. From scripture, you know, I think from great bodhisattvas like Jesus, I think we can infer certain things. Like, yeah, you know, we look at the scriptures and we read it and we say, oh yeah, Jesus did this and that, and this is how he felt. You know, um, yeah, I mean, yeah, being misunderstood. I think a lot of spiritual leaders are misunderstood. You know, prophets are misunderstood. Um, because often what's happening with these beings is they're appearing to do something in a time when people aren't ready for it necessarily. And so there's always going to be resistance. You know, we have a lot of resistance to prophets. Prophets aren't telling the future, right? Prophets are just saying, "Oh, this is what's happening." You know, like you can get with it or not, and then we get really pissed off because we actually don't want to know what's happening. You know, that's the burden that many of you have to hold. Is like you. This is another piece. The more awakened you're getting, the more realized that you're getting, the more people will not understand what you're experiencing. This is what I talk about. I talk about Contact, about the Jodie Foster movie. This is the same thing. It's like she realizes, like, I can't convince you. Like, this is such a personal experience that I'm having, and I'm surrounded by people who just aren't willing to do the labor to even go there. And that's what you have to understand. Is that like it's things that you experience won't be understood by others around you. I know, I know, because so many of you reach out to me, and and other friends too. People reach out and say like, I can't tell anyone this, because people will misunderstand it, they won't get it, and then there'll be trouble. Yeah, you know, So the options are you just don't tell anyone, or secondly, you like me, like me, I just have done the work to create community of friends and colleagues whom we all share similar experiences, and so I can go to them and say, I just, you know, um, had this experience, you know, and then people will be like, yeah, let's talk about it. I had this dream, or I saw this being, or I had this vision, you know, or this dead person won't leave my house, you know. um, yeah, and it's normal. It becomes normal because that is the price of wisdom and clarity, is that you begin to see and experience everything in a way that most people aren't. You know? And like I said in the past, like yeah, then it's like, okay, is this really happening? Is this delusion? Is this something else? This is why you have people to check in with. This is why you have other intuitives and mediums and psychics and whomever, realized people that you can go to and say, like, is it like what's happening? You know, having a good therapist as well is also a good thing, a good resource to have if you have that capacity. You know, because it's just discerning. It's like, okay, what's really happening? Because this is what happens. Reality just gets really disrupted, and you're like, oh, you know, um, we're all living in different realities. Exactly, we're all living in different realities. You know, this is why I say, and I learned this from Rinpoche. It's like you just don't know who people are. Like you don't, and that's both good and bad, right? You just don't know. And I always use the grocery store as an example, because I like to like go to public places and just think about who people are. Where do people come from? What are they experiencing? Because that's part of my work in compassion and empathy. It's like I need to remember that people have lives and their lives aren't about pleasing me, which some of you could benefit from, which apparently I was supposed to do a teaching on that today or a practice. um, but yeah, just to go and just be like, I wonder what experience this person's having right now. What are they seeing? What are they experiencing? There are great there are great realized beings that were just like passing in the grocery store. What? Oh, it was what's her name? Not Lisa Loeb, but which Lisa Loeb is having a comeback right now in mainstream culture, which just reminds me of how old I'm getting. But what if God was one of us? Just someone on the bus trying to make their way home. I love that song. I forget who sang it. Um, Not Lisa Loeb, but I just think that's so true. They're just really awakened beings who masquerade as human. They're just in the world. And this is, and again, from people talking about this, they're just in the world. And I just think that's incredible that they take on human form, you know, primarily just to help us. You know, it's like touched by an angel, you know. Um, they're just walking around in the world. We just don't, most of us don't know who they are or what they are. You know, I love that. Um, Unfortunately, on the other hand, there are beings who are not so benevolent in human form who are trying to do the opposite. So there's no light without darkness. That's the law of the reality that we're moving through. There's always contrast. There's always balance. You know, where there's great good, there's always, I would say, great evil, even though I don't like using that word. But where there's great light, there's always great darkness. You know, Joan Osborne. What if God was one of us? God is one of us. Or, well, gods, you know, look just like us, actually. And that also comes directly out of Tibetan mythology as well. So you can read that, as, you know, but yeah, yeah. And the age that we've shifted into um, now is a time where not most, but a lot of people will be awakening more to different abilities and so forth. Because even though it doesn't seem like we're in the upswing, you know, we're moving up now. We're moving up, you know. Even though it doesn't seem like it, we're moving up. You know, we're moving back into a golden age. You know, we're swinging back up slowly. You know, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a whole bunch of work to do. We do. We have a lot of work to do, but the conditions for that work are getting better. You know, yeah, still, again, not all of us are going to make it. You know, um, and that's always going to be the case, no matter what age we're in. Even if it's a dark age or an age of light, still not everyone's going to make it. You know, we have been beings in past lives who have not made it when other people have made it, but we are still on a path moving towards our awakening, and that's something to celebrate. Yeah, but going back to this Jesus, you know, which I think is still such a relevant thing. You know, I talk to other, like, you know, practitioners, spiritual people who are doing Public teaching, yeah, it's what I've had to understand is that I'm not everyone's teacher, and like what I say is quite particular. Um, it's my teaching is an integration of multiple lineages, you know, that Tibetan Buddhism of Vajrayana didn't answer all the questions. It doesn't answer all the questions for me. Not as any other path, right? So I have to bring different paths together along with my experience of being embodied in the way that I'm embodied to bring context to how these teachings are manifesting. There's a level of complexity, right, that comes out of this. You know? So I know we're supposed to be through at one, but I just want to do just as usual. I've talked the whole time. you know, um, I just want to just sit for 10 minutes, right? I just want to do just the practice of 10 minutes because I just kind of just like kept talking and talking. So I've downloaded a bunch of stuff on on you, and you need time to integrate. So let's begin that integration. So we're just gonna just do just like again like moving to this first stage of Mahamudra, which is just shamatha, just letting everything be, right? And the visualization that I use a lot lately is just it's the cloud like it's I'm sorry the sky like mind meditation, right? So it's beginning to equate the mind itself with a vast, limitless sky. And this is for some of you who are familiar with this is called sky gazing, and this comes out of the Dzogchen tradition, um, which is where I started. I started in Dzogchen practice years ago, 20 years ago. Um, but sky gazing is actually going outside and looking up at the sky, right, and letting your awareness mingle with the spaciousness of the sky. And it's better to have like, of course, to be in some wide open space where you can get a huge, full, expansive view of the sky. But just sitting here, right, just in your home, just imagine that the mind is just like a sky, wide open, vast, bright. The brightness of the sky is the energy of awareness. Letting the mind fall open. And as the mind falls open, beginning to see any thoughts and emotions that arise in the mind. It's just like clouds passing through the mind. Letting those clouds go, those clouds of thoughts within the sky like mind. Just let everything pass through, letting the mind just stay open and bright. And just sitting with this. Okay, we're gonna start just coming back, just waking the body, stretching, moving, doing some cleansing breaths, whatever feels appropriate for you right now. So thank you all for your practice. It's not what I intended for today. I intended us to do way more practice, but we're gonna be getting back into regular Matara practice as well. As Lama Justin transitions back out of retreat back into the Sangha. Um, so we're gonna get back get back to business, being a little more regular. But thank you all so much again. This is all recorded, so please come back. I'm definitely coming back and listening to this probably today. This teaching, this talk. So come back, listen to this talk. Let it soak. Let it soak in. We'll get the everything back on the schedule coming up in July. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And I'll see some of you tomorrow night for Medicine Buddha practice, which may very well be a continuation of this conversation. Um, thank you all so much.